Hi, welcome to this review of Workiom.com. So Workiom is a project management slash business management solution. It's quite hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what does Workiom does, but you can see it as an alternative to Airtable. Essentially, what it does is allows you to build applications and databases and connect them in a no-code manner. So for those regular users of Airtable, you will find many of the functions and form of Workiom to be very similar. At the same time, it's also different in the sense that they have powerful automations that allow you to transfer data from one app to the other. I know that in recent weeks, Airtable has also released their automations functions and their ability to connect different bases also. So in that sense, this is quite similar to Airtable, but let's take a look at what it can do. So Workiom prides itself as being the easy and fast way to manage your team and data. There's a lot of information on the site, things like taking ownership of your data, unleashing your team's potential. Data is beautiful. Most of these things are not necessarily the most important thing to know. Let's take a look at the features, right? Um, Essentially, if you're familiar with Airtable, you'll see that a lot of the features listed here are quite familiar: collaboration, filtering, view creation, aggregations and formulas, assigning records and file sharing. Of course, the most important thing is whether Workiom actually pulls off these features in a way that's usable and makes it easy for the user to make use of the application. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the automation is something that's relatively unique or was relatively unique until Airtable released its recent automations function. But having tried and built out some uh, databases and apps inside Workiom, I can say that it's a fairly interesting tool. So I think with that, let's kind of like jump right in. So first off, when you're inside Workiom, you'll notice that there are a few things that you can do. One of the interesting part about Workiom is that you can actually get quite granular in terms of your permissions. So you are able to edit permissions to a granular level. I'm not sure like exactly how much use this is, but I think this is probably much more useful when you actually start to build out more applications and add more users to the system. So this could be ideal for perhaps agencies or startups who basically want a single tool to manage different aspects of their business, from project management to client management to CRM, for example, right? So some of the other things that Workiom has is that basically they have allow you to set up your own email SMTP. This is so that you can actually send out email notifications to yourself or to a client, for example, right? So let's take a look at what the interface for Workiom looks like. So when you log into Workiom for the first time, right, you'll see that they have a lot of different templates that you can use: task management, order management, CRM, so on and so forth, right? Here, over here under application, right, is basically where you go and create your applications. Like for me, I've already started creating 3 different applications. I found that some of the templates in Workiom are a little bit too custom for me. So I've tried to build a few applications that would make sense in my situation, which is that of running a digital agency. So let's take a look at what I've built, right? So in the case of the 3 different applications I've built, what I've built is I built a contact database, I've built a project management jobs system, and I built a CRM pipeline, right? So these are the 3 applications I've built, right? So let's take a look at how I've connected these 3 applications together. So this is an example of the contact database. So for people who are familiar with tools like Airtable, you will need to reorientate your your perception to fit in line with what Workiom is like. Because, for example, right, whereas you would create tabs in Airtable, right, Workiom functions by way of lists, right? So over here, we've created multiple lists, a contact list and an accounts list, right? So in the case of this contact database, right, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a database of accounts. That means companies that we have relationships with, right? And we also want to build a list of contacts. That means people who are working at these organizations. So these could be clients, this could be prospects, this could be just people we've met and everything. So this is just meant to be like a, 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 a main database, but which we can pull records and information from. For Workium, you can actually go ahead and create things like manage the roles and the users and settings here. So for example, each of the different apps has admin functions that you can manage. You can also add reports to each of the apps that you've built. I won't show it here, but I'll go to another database to show it. So over here, you see I've created like 3 different contacts and 5 different accounts. So what you do if you want to edit how how this list is formatted, you go to edit list. And then it's very similar to how most database apps are. You can use different functions to create, you have different field types that you can choose, right? One of the things about Workium is that basically you can actually link to with an external application. That means basically you can link to another app uh, outside of what you have here. So I think that's one of the key differences that you can use. So one of the things with Airtable that I find was limiting was that you could only basically link to other records within the same Airtable itself. So in a sense, if you didn't want your colleagues or your teammates to see the content in another database, it was very difficult to do so. At least with Workium, you are able to pull the data from another base so that you can actually have different silos of information that certain team members can see and certain team members cannot see. So I think that's one of the interesting and useful functions for Workium. So in any case, what I've built here is basically a database of contacts and a database of lists. So in terms of contacts, you can see that, let's say if we were to add a new record right now, let's see. So let's just create a new contact and then let's just, right, and just create some imaginary characters. Right, organization would be, right. So now we've created a contact entry, and we've also linked it to a company record. So now John Doe exists as a record in our CRM. Of course, John is actually a staff member of Acme Technology, right? So that's how you go about creating an entry. So now that's the entry is created. And then of course you have the accounts, right? You can of course like set different account tiers. Like for example, this is right. You have you can choose between the drop down list of different statuses. So now that we've seen a very simple contact database, right? Let's take a look at some of the automations that can be built. Actually, let's take a look at different views. So within the this database itself, you can actually create different views. You can create like a sign up form over here. So over here, I've created a sign up form that looks like this, right? So let's say, for example, you want to onboard a new client, you could get them to fill up a sign up form, and they will be added to your CRM right away, right? You can also do things like you can also create like a Kanban board, right? So right now, Workiom has a table view, a Kanban board view, and a form view, and a calendar view also. So it's not as fully built out in terms of view as Airtable, but it has different functions compared to Airtable also, right? So what I've done over here is an example of different companies that we have relationships with, right? And the different currently the different, how do I put it this way? The different stages we are at in terms of interacting with them. So let's move on to the pipeline, right? So we've seen what can be built with a contact database. So this is a fairly simple contact database so far. But let's take a look at how we can actually build a pipeline, right? So a sales CRM pipeline. Cool. So right now, offhand, we have one list for the pipeline table. It's basically, so if you want to create a list of all the deals that are currently in discussions and in progress, right, you could go about, you would just basically create a grid, right, and do it. So far, what you see here is that I have created entry, right, for a new potential deal that's in the pipeline. The the contact is linked to one of the contacts we've created in the other database for the contact database, and the account, the company, is linked to also the other database, right? And we've indicated that the deal status is proposal is sent, the deal size is how much, and so forth. You can see over here the interface is quite it's quite close. It's closer to a full-fledged CRM than the more simplified or the more universal interface that's used by Airtable. So in that sense, this is actually pretty interesting. You can also use this to actually send comments to your colleagues also. So I want to talk about next, right? Automations, right? So where Workiom starts to shine is when you start to actually look at the automations that it can build, right? So in this case over here, let's go back here, right? We have a few deals that are currently in discussion, right? So now you're looking at the Kanban view right now. So we want to actually use the data here and transfer it to another database. So let's think about this in terms of a workflow, right? What we want to do is when a deal is won, we want to be able to immediately send the deal into our job or project management database, right, to kickstart the entire process. So we could build a automation that looks like this, right? So create a job from a one deal. So over here, what we've built is an automation trigger. So the trigger type is basically when the value is changed in the, for this particular list, like product types, and the chosen field is deal status, right? We've chosen deal status. What this means that is when the value of the deal status inside this list is changed, right? And the condition is that, right? We've chosen static list deal status. When deal status equals to deal one, right? Right. Then two actions will happen. We will create a record in jobs, which is the next database that we've created. And these are all the functions, and these are all the map details, right? And at the same time, it will create a task, right? Okay, let's maybe try and show you what this looks like in in actuality. So right now we have this particular job called wall repair package one. So let's see what happens when we pull the job over to deal one. right? Right. So you can see from the record something has happened, right? And what has happened is that this automation has run. What does it look like in this other database? So remember we had three different databases, right? The contact database, the pipeline database, and the jobs database. So right now what we're seeing is that once a certain condition is met inside the jobs, inside the pipeline, right? Like a deal is won, it automatically triggers two specific actions inside the jobs database. That means what happens is, let's take a look. So click the refresh button. Now you can see that there is now a newly created job in the system. So just to orientate, right, the jobs database is essentially a project management database that is sorted by the specific jobs that are open in the system and tasks associated with specific jobs. So what has happened now is that we have the automation has triggered a new job to be created. It's auto-populated. It's grabbed the name of the client organization and put it here. Pulling dynamic data into this is pulled the client contact from the deal into here, right? So you can see over here that also it is showing the related deal. Notice that now the deal status is deal one, right? So this is what happens as a result of the automation. You can see that over here there's a record of the Workiom agent, right? That means the automation, right? Taking the deal one and creating a new task inside of the job system. At the same time, so a new job has been created, and basically, the team can just get going. At the same time, also, right, there is a new task that is created, right? So we call this task call for internal briefing, right? So what we have here is that we would have to basically, let me see. Yep. Yep. So this part is manual. You need to connect this, right? But what it has done is it calls for internal briefing. So if you imagine the workflow in your company, right, this would be once a deal has been won, you pull the deal status into deal one. It creates a job opening inside the job system, and it also creates a task asking for everybody to gather for internal briefing. So basically, it helps to automate the automation that you've built. Basically, helps to create all these things automatically, and it kind of like saves time and everything, right? So another example of another automation that we can build is when we take a look at this. So I wanted to kind of like show this over here. So now that we're looking at specific tasks, right, we can switch to Kanban view, right? For example, right, in a typical agency workflow, right, I might have a task that's ongoing, right? So let's take a look at this particular task, right? Select brand of wall cement, right? It's related to this job, right, for this client. So now what happens is that the lead status is that this job has commenced already. What I want to do, right, is what I've done here is actually I built a trigger. The trigger is as follows, right? When the value of task status changes to for internal checking, right? It's notified user. So what we want to do, right, is over here in this particular task, we have indicated that the action is to be actioned by Donald, right, myself. Is to the check is the then we have indicated that the task should be checked quality controlled by another person. In this case, I put myself here, right? And then it should be presented by another person. So you could have different people in your organization assigned to the different things. So it could be the action is done by the designer, is checked by the art director, and is presented by your project manager, for example. So what happens is what we want to do is we want to ensure that, let's say, this task has been completed by the designer, right? We want to pull it over to ready for internal checking, right? And now you see that there's a notification, there's a task that requires your review. The reason there's a notification, right, is that, and the notification goes here, right? There's a task that requires your review, right? The reason why we want to do this, right, is in terms of the automation, right? If you look at it, right, how we've built it is that we want a very, very specific trigger. When the task status is changed to for internal tracking, then we want to notify the specific user, the specific user. In this case, this is the person who is supposed to check. And the message is there's a task that requires your internal review, right? And that tells the person, in this case myself, right, that I have to go and check what the designer has done, right? If we wanted to build another similar task, we could, for example, build a let's try when the value has changed in the task for choose field that we want, task status, and the condition when the task status, right, static list task. Okay, so this requires a little bit of manual work, but what you want to do is you want to get the task list actions to present to client. When it's ready to present to client, what you want to do is you want to notify the user. In this case, you choose the dynamic option. You want to choose notify the person who's supposed to present this. You have a task to present to the client, and it's done. So we call this notify user to present task. Okay. If you really want to be specific, right? You save. Okay. This would kind of mean that now, if you go to the Kanban board, let's say we've checked and it's ready for internal checking, right? The person who's doing the checking, after he or she is satisfied with the checking, and drag it over to present to client. And so another notification is triggered. You have a task to present to the client, right? So now you can see that under the notification, you have a task to present to the client. So if we open it up, we can see that the task status is ready for internal checking, present to client, and now the status is that is ready to present to client. So you can see the task data has changed from ready for internal checking to present to client, right? So then you can take the whatever has been done, whether it's a piece of design or a piece of content, you can take it to show the client. So that's kind of like how the Workiom works, right? It's a way to basically build different apps, right? You could build a contact database, you could do a project management application, you could build a CRM pipeline, and you can connect it with automations. You can pull data from each database to furnish records in the other. So all in all, it's has a lot of similarities to Airtable. I think it has a slightly unique take on things, and overall the user interface feels clean and functional and it's usable. I think there, of course, there are rooms for improvement. Like some UI UX interfaces could be improved upon. Certain things like, for example, additional functions could be built out. I think in terms of like mobile apps, they're still I think we're still waiting for like an iPhone mobile app at the moment. But overall, I think this is an interesting take on um, project management, process management, workflow management. It might be suitable for agencies that have very customized workflows, which don't quite fit most project management tools out there. So for agencies that are a little bit more looking for a tool that they can actually bend to their will, this is an option to consider, in addition to the usual contenders like Airtable or Infinity, and so on and so forth. I think the good upside about this tool is the ability to pull records from different databases. So you are able to still ensure silo and granular views and permissions, so that one set of users in your organization cannot see another database, while still being able to interact with some of the data from there. The automations is also pretty cool. Also, right now it seems to be working pretty fine. So all in all, I think if you are a agency or a service business that needs a tool that you can customize to fit your workflow and processes, this is a tool that you can consider. So with that, that's my review of Workiom. So if you have any questions, just drop a comment in the comments below, and I look forward to talking or presenting to you soon. Thank you, everyone.